Hello and welcome to Kalam podcast recording in Ramallah on the occupied West Bank in Palestine. We're sitting in Sirdab's studio and I'm honored and delighted to introduce Mariam Barghouti, a journalist and a writer. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today on Kalam podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's also an honor and a privilege.
Mariam, for the past 2 years, you've done a lot of reporting on the families of martyrs and on resistance fighters in Nablus and in Jenin. How have these experiences been?
I think, they require a moment of silence, right?
Yeah.
They've been teaching, they really transformed me because as a reporter, you're entrusted with people's stories,
Yeah.
right? And wow, I didn't expect to cry from like question one, but you're entrusted with people's stories. And every time I go and I interview them, the families, the mothers that lost their sons, the resistance fighters that would later be assassinated, the fathers, the little kids, I leave telling them your stories and amane bra'ibti.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's something that I carry with me and that's an Arabic phrase that it's basically an entrustment that I hold in my spine, right? Because I'm entrusted with it. They're taking moment out of their grief and placing hope and sharing their story with me as a journalist, because that's my obligation. That's my duty to share it with the world, because what's happening is injustice, right? We don't just write stories for the sake of writing them.
Of course.
Yeah, there's always a purpose. I saw the humanity. Maybe I can speak to you on different levels. So I'll start with the resistance fighters.
Mm-hmm.
Interviewing, I interviewed people like Nidal Khazem, who was one of the co-founders of one of the battalions in the Jenin Brigade, in Jenin refugee camp. And I believe he was 28 at the time. And he was later assassinated, almost 8 months later, I believe. And he was so humble when he spoke with us. And I asked him, I'm like, why are you fighting? What are you holding, first of all? What is these guns? They're so weak compared to the drone that's above us.
Yeah.
They're so weak compared to what the Israeli military has. Do you really believe you have a chance? And the answer with such sincerity, this is what we have, our life. And if we don't fight for our life, then what is left? And that really transforms you. You see kind of someone so strong, but at the same time afraid, and at the same time confronting that fear, and at the same time very skeptical, I suppose, of speaking with me as a journalist, or speaking with whoever was with me as well. International journalists would be with me as well. And they'd be more skeptical, and still they'd afford us a chance to share their stories. And that, I don't know, it changed me as a journalist and their willingness, and then it changed me as a Palestinian, that these are the people fighting for my freedom. They're not just fighting for Jenin refugee camp. They're fighting for Palestine, and they tell you that. They say, we're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for all of you. And what we hope to be are initiators in trying to push people to do otherwise, to not just believe that there is nothing you can do, and to confront. Even if you get arrested, even if you get shot and killed, you still have to try.
Yeah.
And it humbles you. Because you see, truly, they don't have much. The guns that they have, they either stole from the Israeli military itself, or they put together with scraps of metal. The pistol that they use is called a Carlos. And I don't know if anyone knows what a Carlos is, but 9 out of 10 bullets are fired back at you. Okay, so they're taking that risk. And then it goes to people. So that's a shock that I feel, and it changes you. And then after Nidal was assassinated in March 2022, I believe, or 2023. It was March 2023, 16. And I feel bad that I forget, but I know so many dates of Palestinians that get assassinated. Somehow it's all the days of the year for me.
Yeah.
So I had his recording. It was the last recording of a journalist that interviewed him. And I took it to his father, Amin Khazem. And Amin Khazem is this very large man, very, very, like, You know, it was very big to me. I'm looking up at this man.
Mm-hmm.
And he just lost his son, Nidal. And I asked him, you know, speak to me about your son. And then he breaks down, you know, but holding it in. Somehow he breaks down, but holding it in. He doesn't cry. He's very tough and tries to take it. But he doesn't sit and just talk about his son and how he was a fighter. He doesn't galvanize his son. He remembers his son and who he was as a son, you know? He's like, he respected me. He wanted to study this, or the little idiosyncrasies, his favorite food. And that's what we remember. People forget that they're not resistance fighters. هدول أهلنا. This is our family. You know, those are the people fighting.
Yeah.
And it brings you to that recognition. And then you speak with, you know, you see the little kids in the refugee camps that either only know the bullet from the Israeli soldier or the bullet from the resistance fighter. One is trying to kill them and the other's protecting them. And of course, they're going to grow up and say, I will be a resistance fighter as long as the soldier is still shooting at me.
Sure.
And it makes you realize, yeah, this is inevitable. Every child is going to become a resistance fighter in one way or the other. It doesn't necessarily mean holding a gun. It can come down to the banality of saying Palestine from the river to the sea, because that's even criminalized. And the way all of that changed me is I can't be quiet. I can't. My ceiling cannot be, I want the West Bank and Gaza to be Palestine. What? The Jenin refugee camp, they're refugees from 48, from Heartland, Palestine. And so it reminded me to kind of confront that. And as a journalist, I have to say these things. I have to use the words that they use. And as a Palestinian journalist, I can't but not use these words. So I think that's how it changed me. It made me braver, because you realize how close death by Israel is in proximity. I don't know if that makes sense. It's also a lot.
It does, of course. And I mean, these are extremely heavy subjects, and especially for you as a journalist to go and to receive these testimonies and to get to know people that many times then are killed. So now you have testimonies from people who are not with us anymore. And the Arabic expression that you mentioned, "Amani fi raqabti," this obviously is a burden. How do you sort of how do you deal with that kind of? I mean, it's trauma in a way, even for you. You know, just receiving these. I guess there's an outlet when you write the stories, right? Or
yeah, there is, but I still haven't written most. You know, most of it I still have, and I feel bad about that. You know, I keep going back to it after it, but I can't. I look at the paper and I can't. I haven't written in months, for example. And after I interviewed more and more people, at least when I was a correspondent with Mondawais.
Yeah.
And, you know, it got to a point where I just said, I can't. I don't know how many different ways I can write the story differently to afford people their idiosyncrasies and to allow it to resonate. What am I going to archive? You know, people's stories, that's it for archive? No, it's for change. It is trauma. I don't think it's trauma that scares as much as it is trauma that forces you into a healing process.
What does that look like?
I'm not sure. I'm still figuring that one out. But it looks like patience. It looks like understanding. It looks like, yeah, I'm going to give every sentence what it is owed. And I will write the stories as they are, not as I am. And I had to confront that a lot.
Like taking yourself out of the story?
It's not, no, I don't believe I have to take myself out of the story. You're supposed to be, you are part of the story.
Yeah.
You know, people are sharing things with you because you are who you are. They'll say different things. I think if you ask the same exact questions that I did, then they would to me, right?
Yeah.
But maybe it's more of confronting myself. So there would be, you know, this is what I mean when I said, you know, the meeting with them changed me and I had to hire the ceilings. You know, in the beginning, it's the emphasis on armed resistance and we need that and things like that. You know, I'm not someone that's going to go and be like, yeah, everyone needs to participate in armed resistance, right? But you realize that that's a truth. You know, that is a truth for a reality for a people. And I have to say these things. I have to legitimize it in their context, and I have to contextualize it.
Yeah.
So whether I agree or not with how they see things or how things need to be done didn't matter anymore, because they are the experts in the reality. And, it kind of, that's how it's a tug of war with your weakness and your own low ceiling and how you have to hire it, and remembering it's not about you. Kind of is, but it's not.
Sure.
Yeah. Again, I keep saying, does that make sense? But because I understand what a muddled reality it is, that I don't fully have a command on language to showcase the heart in it,
I understand what you're saying. I think for a lot of people that are, writing about these things and in some way or another invested in the Palestinian cause since the 7th of October have sort of been struggling to find the right way to express certain feelings. And how have you been coping? Now we're talking about the resistance and all of the immense tragedy on the West Bank, but since the 7th of October, there's a genocide that's taking place in Gaza. How has that affected your thinking? Or, another tough question.
I don't know if it's tough as much as it is. I don't know if people are ready to hear it. I think October 7th was a necessity. I was so happy when I saw it as broken. I'm like, oh my God, we finally managed to do something.
Yeah.
Because I am Palestinian. I've been through it. I've been through checkpoints. I was humiliated. I was arrested. I was sent to jail for a week when I was just 20 because one soldier wanted to send me to jail, quite literally fabricated charges against me. And then, there is a genocide happening in Gaza, and that wasn't a response of Israel to October 7th. That was always the goal. October 7th was taken as the opportunity to exaggerate kind of Israel's fear and to be able to perpetuate the crimes that it is perpetuating. And it has been hard because also in the West Bank, we're reaching lethal rates, unprecedented rates of murder against Palestinians by Israel. But then we have to constantly place it in a point of comparison with Gaza. We are like, okay, what's 540,000? So even journalists in the West Bank are covering Gaza at this point. And we see, more than 150 of our colleagues and peers were killed. Yeah. And of course, international media is in their own head. They really need to sit with themselves and decolonize their minds.
It's the deadliest period for journalists in the history of the measurement of this thing.
Exactly. And doesn't that break your heart?
Yeah.
And
it does. It
does.
I think I would be crazy if it didn't.
It would be crazy. But somehow it's legitimized.
Yeah.
Right? But so it's we're left to kind of discuss what we're prioritizing, where to cast light, but at the same time, Israel is moving full force forward in trying to either force Palestinians out of their homes or to just bloody murder all of them, right? And it's a very hard thing to grapple because, again, as a Palestinian journalist, we're not just reporters, we are the reported.
Yes.
People don't get that. I'm not, standing and interviewing people. I am standing interviewing people and deeply afraid that, an Israeli soldier is going to target me as well. We saw what happened with Shireen Abu Akleh. That was the precedent that set the tone for what Israel is doing now. Every little aggression, if tolerated, will lead to a bigger one. And it's so hard to explain this to the world. It's so hard. 40,000 killed, but you're going to reference October 7th? And then it's tackling that, my anger. And then at the same time, you're trying to put it in neatly put, concise words that are relatable, that are understandable, because people don't want to be uncomfortable. No, get uncomfortable. We're getting killed.
Yeah, it is uncomfortable.
It is.
Yeah.
For some.
I think for all, but it depends on what you put into that word, So how about yourself? How did you get into first activism in Palestine? I know that I think you began in Nabi Saleh covering the weekly protests there against land seizure and the Tamimi family. So how did you begin this?
We're all occupied. It's not really, you don't begin it. it
Right.
comes to you,
Sure.
you know. And I was young. I believe, end of my high school, just about to enter undergrad, and the unarmed Palestinian resistance movement against illegal Israeli annexation of Palestinian, not just lands, but very pivotal resources like
Yeah.
water.
Yeah.
They were happening very violently. So this popular struggle erupted in different areas of the West Bank to try and protest, and rally, I guess. Palestinians actually tried to work with the Israeli Supreme Court to be like, give an
Yeah.
order against your
Yeah.
settlers. They tried that. And of course, youth get involved, just like we see the encampments in university.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the younger you are, the less likely you are conditioned to be afraid of certain things. And the more you are a dreamer, the more you believe that things can change.
Mm-hmm.
So we began getting involved, first by invite, by these villages themselves, to ask for support. And then while I was there, and you were correct, and it was in Nabi Saleh, I would see these international journalists from Fox News and otherwise come there, and the reporting was just, it's just blatant lies. You'd have a journalist literally pointing at an empty field saying, "Oh, look at the youth throwing stones." I'm like, they didn't start throwing stones yet. If you'd wait a bit, you'd actually be telling the truth, but they're not even. But it's like this preemptive criminalization of Palestinians rather than showcasing it as a response to a bullet,
Yeah.
right? And then, yeah, I saw the falsehood of their reporting, and I'm someone that speaks English.
Yeah.
So I was able to access international media. I was able to follow up because I'm also present in the interviews. I also speak Arabic,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand, both cultures.
Yeah.
So I just saw the blatant lies. I'm like, is this really journalism? Then okay, let's teach you something about this. And I actually began first as a personal blog covering the same stories they were covering, but in more accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, slowly I began getting involved in media. But that's how, I don't like the term activist in a sense, because it's grown to have this connotation that you choose to take up a cause, and that's not the Palestinian reality,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're forced to fight for our life. We're all activists in that way.
Sure.
But yeah, I did become active in understanding more and in confronting, and I realized the power of media, and I realized how Israel prioritized media. And then I later learned how these correspondents had Israeli minders that would
Yeah.
control what they're reporting. So that's how I got involved. And the way I became a journalist was accidental. It was by necessity. It wasn't by choice. I don't want to be a journalist.
Mm.
I wanted to be many things in life. Journalist wasn't one of them. I wanted to write poetry, maybe be an artist. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you just get dragged into that out of necessity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been kind of dancing around the topic of Western media, and we've seen it, I mean, fail time and time again, and accurately covering not just Palestine but many liberation struggles in the global South, and just in general, especially in the Arab world, of completely dehumanizing Arab people, or just brown people in general, let's say. I think after 7th of October, it's intensified, and I would be curious on your take of like how do we move forward, or kind of past the paradigm where you have to use like specifically Anglo-Saxon media to get your message out to the world.
Okay. I don't think they failed, Western media, because if they failed, you are launching off of the assumption that their goal was to serve, right? Their goal was to kind of conceal crimes by certain people and criminalize others. And I think they were very successful in that. We can't look at, Western media as a service to humanity. CNN was giving out policy briefs to their reporters that they can't use words like genocide. Likewise, the New
In
York Times
Palestine, yeah.
or Palestine, and that's an emblem of what their goal is. It wasn't to serve us. It wasn't to serve humanity. It was to serve the interests of a certain group, right? Whoever that group is, it varies different ways, and at different levels. But in terms of it's not just failing. I mean, after October 7th, we saw the brutality of it. I mean, the interviews I did, not even this year, just I guess in 2021, during the uprising of hope and unity here, it felt like an interrogation by a Shabak agent.
Yeah.
You know, are you a journalist or do you work for the Israeli Shabak? Why are you asking me these questions that I was literally asked by an Israeli Shabak agent when I was 18?
Yeah.
You know? And then post October 7th, it was just delusion. It was complete delusion. You can't claim objectivity, you know, and not bring, you can't claim objectivity and then bring me an Israeli military spokesperson as fact. This is someone that is currently engaging in a war, in crimes. Forget, this is before Israel's been taken to the ICC for genocide. Before, just on that basic level that you are taking this actor as fact, but you're not doing the same. It's military, but it's truly just falsehood. Bring a Qassam fighter. You want a military spokes? By all means, bring a Qassam fighter. Why aren't you informing people about the speeches from Abu Ubaidah? You keep asking Palestinians, do you condemn Hamas? Do I look like a representative of either what Hamas is doing? And is that even a proper question? Do you condemn the Israeli military that is literally committing genocide? I don't see them ever ask that, an Israeli rep. Never. And it shows you that's clandestine and subtle manipulation in media. And what it tries to do, and it's so sinister, they would bring people from Gaza, you know, who probably don't have the strongest grasp on the English language, and try to trap them in these questions rather than work with them to actually unearth information. And that's sick. That's truly a sickness. That's not objectivity. That's not being, we have to be, you know, non-biased. No, that's purely perpetuating a crime, you know? Yeah, Western media is just, wow. It is. It will serve researchers for years to examine them years. Yeah.
Shout out to those researchers doing the Lord's work. What about you mentioned as well the encampment movements in the West. Do you have faith in them affecting any kind of change?
Okay, what kind of change?
That's the question, I guess. Well, if the logic is that if a certain generation in the West would be able to shift a certain narrative, the narrative that you've just disseminated from Western media, then in turn, maybe they could affect change at a political level, and maybe, you know, like that kind of effect. You're smiling. It might be a naive thought.
No.
But do you think that is a possibility?
I think they already did the change. I don't know if they will change the current older generation, but they're the future. So if that's the future, I'm happy. You know, we'll just probably have to endure a bit more. But of course, I have hope that they're going to bring about change. They truly are the future, and they shook. I really think they shook the world to its core.
Absolutely.
And we appealed to the world as Palestinians, and they were the ones that answered. And they didn't just answer for us, they answered for themselves, which takes a strength. Recognizing your connection with a place that seems so distant and far is power. That is true power. I do think they're going to bring, I think they changed. They already brought the change. We just haven't seen it yet, you know?
These things take time, I guess.
They do. They just need protection. We need to protect them. We really need to protect them in any shape, way, or form. If it's not, and when I say protect, not like at the physical level, let them get suspended from schools and all that. Fight it. But, you know, I think they'll get over it. We need to protect that heart. They have such a clean heart that they are taking on, you know, their own communities in the name of justice. You know?
And I guess you can tell how threatening they are to at least the American system, well, all over the Western world, because of how the response has been so tough. I mean, of course, police brutality is something that Black and brown communities experience on a daily basis in the U.S., but I don't know the last time I saw like a SWAT team, riot police person like beat up a 60-year-old Jewish professor, you know? because it's yeah, I think these are the things that I struggle with describing, like what is it, what is language even, like how do we talk about these things?
Yeah. You don't. You don't talk about these things. You got to stop these things.
Yeah,
There's a point where words
sure.
stop. We got to stop.
Yeah, you confront fascism not with words.
Exactly. And I don't know why it's surprising. I mean, we've been seeing it here for so long. What we don't we see it in different areas of the world.
Sure.
What now that it's in America, oh, it's scary. America was built on massacres. It is a colonial state in its essence.
Yeah.
For me it wasn't shocking. It was the expectation. And I think the students and people had a little hope in policymakers to show us otherwise, but we kind of expected this to be the response. Israel, I would say Israel, but the U.S. is also a military state, right? Its police force trains within Israel itself, and they do exchange programs. They train in Cyprus. So it's not surprising all this training goes to waste. Absolutely not. You got to take the first opportunity. How else are they going to explain it to the funders and the arms trades, right? How else are they going to sell these weapons?
If we bring it back a little bit to the conditions of your work, excuse me, as a journalist on the West Bank, what kind of this also may seem like a naive question, but for the viewers of this program, maybe they don't know, what kind of challenges do you face in being a journalist on the West Bank, Palestinian journalist on the West Bank?
I'm trying to think about which challenge to speak about. One is access. It's really hard to move here, right? There's so many checkpoints. And this is why I'm so frustrated with international correspondents that come here. I'm like, you can move so freely. I can't. I'm confined to my West Bank ID. I have to go through 5 checkpoints to get to Jenin. I have to, try and smile in front of the Israeli soldier that is holding a gun against me so I can go do my job. The amount of times I drove and we'd have snipers at us and you're quite literally almost killed or the bullets buzzing. And I know nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to care. Who cares I have an international passport, an American one at this? Shireen Abu had
she
that.
did too, yeah.
When I was arrested in 2014, did the American government intervene? No, they're like, actually, we can't do anything. This is Israel, So there is also that concern in access. And then the other challenge is actually reporting. The editors, especially in international media, and I do write for an English-speaking audience mostly. But they're just like, oh, you can't say this, or oh, you can't say that. I'm like, I can't say occupation. I can't say that the Israeli soldiers said this to this what? So I'm constantly in an unnecessary battle that takes time and energy that could have been avoided if they just really tried to see things as they are, not as they thought they are. And then, I guess it's just, you risk a lot. And then the other challenge is also just navigating the political terrain here.
Sure.
It's so hard. I want to write and report about the Palestinian Authority's corruption, since October 7th. On October 17th, when the hospital was bombed in Gaza, the Palestinian Authority killed 4 Palestinians, including a 9-year-old girl in Jenin. I can't.
In the protests that followed.
They released their riot police on Palestinians in the service of Israel. That's hard for me to cover. I cover it, but it comes with its risks. It comes with the threats. And then, likewise, in terms of covering whether Hamas is corrupt, or if I want to cover, the Qassam brigade's legitimacy in fighting, all of these I have to navigate this political terrain. Not just for abroad, but you're constantly navigating, the realities here as they are and trying to interpret it for abroad to understand it. To understand what this context is.
It's a challenge.
It's truly a challenge. Truly a challenge. Not impossible, but exhausting.
Mariam Barghouti, I'm so grateful that you took the time to speak with us today at Kalam podcast. Thank you so much. If I could ask you to say something about your take on the future, it's such a weird word, but going forward, what do you think? Do you have hope that this like abyss of genocide could lead to something else?
It can't but. this Israel cannot exist after this. Even if anyone thought maybe before, this is truly a psychopathic regime. It has zero legitimacy. It has abused Jewish history. It is not without accident that Israeli soldiers are putting the Star of David in every single home. They're abusing it so they maintain this Jewish attachment so that you can't even criticize Israel. Look how manipulative that is.
It's really deplorable.
It's truly sick. It's a sickness, and it's abuse of a belief, and it's an abuse of a grief and a history there. So it can't but not. Of course, I do have hope. Unfortunately, we're going to pay the price. But, that's the point of struggle. And the rest of it really depends on the world and what it chooses. We're free. We are free. I don't think people understand that. We are so free that we completely rid ourselves of the world. And it is on the world now to decide if it wants to be free or if it wants to continue as it is. Yeah.
Mariam Barghouti, thank you so much for being a guest today on Kalam Podcast.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for doing this. Yeah. This is where the work should be,
Yeah.
Yeah.